The early and mid-2000s were overflowing at the brim, with new programs coming out left and right that forever cemented themselves in the culture of internet history. This was the era of Skype, MSN Messenger, and Windows XP, and it was some of the last years when the internet still somewhat resembled the Wild West. This time was truly a sight to be seen because programs were being released that we never thought possible, pushing the internet to a global scale, and I would personally consider Audacity to be one of the most important programs of this time period. All of these different pieces of software and media eventually led us to where we are now, with the internet acting as a global communication platform where you can find anything and everything. We've got insanely powerful audio workstations, global social media platforms, and some of the most clever programs ever built on the back of these early pioneers. Let's set the scene for the time period in which Audacity came from and take a look at some of the developments around the same time. First off, Y2K, which was the year that Audacity came out, was sort of an almost watershed moment for the US and more broadly the world because there was a lot of panic about computer systems not being able to handle the turnover to the new millennium. Programmers had used two-digit numbers for dates with basically all computer software and were worried that the computers would interpret the year 2000 or 00 in the computer as the year 1900. The reason this was so scary at the time was because at this point, most large institutions around the world were already using computers like banks to calculate interest rates rather than exclusively keeping paper records. Nuclear power plants also had this problem because having the wrong dates could throw off calculations for water pressure or radiation levels. Some people even thought that it would literally be the end of the world, but hilariously, almost nothing happened other than a few minor issues, and all was well. Alongside Y2K, a lot of new things were emerging that completely defined the 2000s, and this wasn't limited to just software. Some of the most beloved cartoons and TV shows came out during this time, like SpongeBob or Courage the Cowardly Dog. The PlayStation 2 also came out around the same time, and to this day is the best-selling console in history. Basically, a lot of stuff was happening really fast and advancing in almost every aspect of our lives, whether it was media, technology, or medicine. And Audacity found its place smack dab in the middle of it all. Audacity started like many other pieces of software at the time as a humble little free program created by some really smart people who were attending college. Well, at least one of them was. The other ended up actually being a professor at that same university. Dominic Mazzoni, the younger of the two, was attending Carnegie Mellon University in 1999, studying a wide array of disciplines like computer architecture and digital audio. The other, Dr. Roger Dannenberg, was an associate research professor who taught computer science at the same university. I was actually watching a video by a content creator named Tantacruel, and he mentions that Roger was studying different aspects of audio engineering, including query by humming. This actually ended up being the precursor to programs like SoundHound or TuneBot. It basically allowed someone to hum a melody of a song, and the algorithm would search a database for matches most closely resembling the audio recording and show results that were possible matches. Their main goal, however, was to create a free program that allowed anyone to visualize audio and work on it with a ton of different tools, and that's exactly what they did with the release of Audacity. The first version that I could find a picture of on the Internet Archive was from 0.8, which was a test version. Its look hasn't really changed much since then, over 22 years later, but I think that's sort of the point. It's not meant to have a sophisticated look and feel, and it fits perfectly within its time period, but its interface isn't so outdated that it doesn't stack up against current software. Dominic had even stated that it needed to be so simple that it wouldn't be overwhelming to the average person just trying to touch up their audio at home. He'd mentioned that a lot of the software he had seen Roger using was ridiculously powerful, but so hard to wrap your head around that new people may just give up from the start, which is why Audacity is so simplistic. These early versions were much less functional than what we currently have, but I don't really think that mattered much because what it could do for free was more than enough for the time. All that was needed was what it provided: a play, stop, and record button amongst a few different effects and a scrubbable viewing window of the audio within. That's literally it, but this was enough to work with in the beginning, and over the course of 20 years, its functionality has been expanded massively by many different people who contribute to the project. Luckily for us, Audacity has been open source since the start and was made under the GPL2 license, so it will remain free and allows a bunch of really smart people to add new things to the project all the time. Early on, this actually ended up being the only audio editor that was available on Mac systems until later programs came out. Not to mention from the start, it was meant to be cross-platform, so no matter if you had a Linux, PC, or Mac, you could use it for free for any purpose, whether it's for a school project or just a YouTube video. Dominic had said while he was being interviewed by Tentacruel that he ended up having more fun making Audacity than doing research in college, and it started consuming more and more of his time. He ended up leaving Carnegie Mellon and started working on Audacity more than anything else, and this was sort of the turning point for the program, and it exploded in popularity in the coming years. I think version 2 was when it really came into its own with a bunch of new features that transformed it from a functional program into a monster audio editor and started being used by more and more professionals. Before this, Audacity was still considered to be in beta, but by 2012 it received its first stable non-beta release. By this point, there were a huge amount of effects like distortion, but one of the biggest things that the program had that very few other free programs had was an amazing denoising option. By taking a sample of the noise that you want removed and then applying it to the entire track, it cleaned up the worst offenders when it came to bad background noise. I would take a guess here and say that most content creators have probably used this function to clean up their audio for their YouTube videos in the past and probably still do to this day. The Audacity Git was also growing in size, with tons of talented people taking on development roles in the program as it got more complex. If you don't know, a Git is sort of like a repository of code that multiple people can contribute to or fork off and work on their own solo version. This is one of the reasons why it being an open source program is so important, as I don't think Audacity would have grown to its massive size without the help of community members and people who cared about it. On top of all the other features added here were an updated de-clicker and de-esser around 2014, which are two plugins that are basically required nowadays for really clean sounding audio. I personally use third-party VSTs for this, but they function similarly and it results in smooth sounding voiceovers in YouTube videos and podcasts. It's sort of miraculous that all of these people came together to create something special for everyone to use for free. I think all these people deserve recognition for doing something great for the community of people online, so I'll leave a link to Audacity's user and developer page so you can go check them all out. People even created extremely detailed documentation for the program for users and developers, and also helped run a forum that's still active to this day. One of those people who ended up helping run Audacity would be none other than Tentacruel, who we've mentioned earlier, so if you don't already watch him, I'll leave a link to his awesome YouTube channel. Anyways, he stated in his video that most people who end up needing help with the program regard Audacity's support team and forum to be miles ahead of any other software out there, including paid programs, and I would tend to agree. I'm not quite sure of the exact timeline, but by this point Audacity had most certainly become one of the most used apps on the internet, and I think it deserves that title. So where is Audacity now? It's earned numerous awards over the years and is widely regarded as the best free audio editing software out there, supported by a massive community of people who care deeply about the program's success. Since its release in 2000, Audacity has been downloaded over 300 million times between multiple sources like FossHub and SourceForge, and I think it deserves all of the praise that it gets. I personally would be nowhere without this program as a younger kid because I used it to cobble together audio for poorly produced YouTube videos back in the early 2010s, and I'm thankful that it helped me to do that. It's also not just used for voiceovers and music editing. It has applications far exceeding anything I would have ever guessed. From seismologists looking at earthquakes to biologists studying animal noises, Audacity has been there to assist with whatever job it finds itself in front of. This might sound hyperbolic, but I think Audacity is one of, if not the most important program that came out of the early internet. If you look at its interface now, it's almost absurd with the amount of features in its toolbar and drop-down menus, but it hasn't lost its approachability and continues to be fairly easy to pick up as a beginner. Sadly, Audacity no longer accepts direct donations, but you can still contribute to FossHub, which supports all of the awesome open source projects that it houses. I think programs like these, along with the people who create and maintain them, deserve all of the recognition in the world, which is why I wanted to make a video about Audacity. If you'd like a more detailed video about the developers and supporters of the program, I'll leave a link to Tentacruel's awesome video about the subject in the description. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.